The next day, Jia asks if nothing truly happened. Minchil says nothing happened, but when Jia presses about it, Minchil gets embarrassed and leaves. Jia now knows something occurred and decides to mess with Minchil for the next few days. However, Minchil starts avoiding Jia at all costs. Jia respects Minchil's privacy, but it's almost as if Minchil is deliberately avoiding all conversation with Jia. After a few days of this, Minchil even texts her saying he won't be going to the gym. Jia is shocked and starts typing a long message, but then Minchil calls her. She heads to a bar, and when Minchil arrives, he is asleep on the table, while Sungyu is crying beside him. Jia assumes they are both extremely drunk. Jia realizes that Minchi is red from drinking too much and that Sungyu was the source of the problem. When Jia confronts Sungyu, he reveals that Minchi was the one who wanted to drink. Sungyu also mentions that Minchi had been acting off for the last few days. Minchil, still drunk, starts making mistakes and asks if Jia and he had a fight during the taxi ride home. Jia ponders this question when Minchil drunkenly leans on her and asks if she's there. In that moment, Minchil tries to kiss Jia, but when she says no, he recalls that Jia once said, "It's up to the person who gives the kiss." Jia denies this, clarifying that she actually said it's a complimentary service, though it's practically the same thing. Despite her denial, the driver asks if they are newlyweds. Jia gets embarrassed and realizes they've been acting like a newlywed couple. The driver then comments that Jia's husband must really love her, which causes Jia to remember that Minchil is in fact her husband. When Jia remarks that Minchil is a thorn in her side, the driver asks if they had a fight. Jia decides they should go somewhere other than Minchil's apartment. Soon after, Minchil wakes up and they find themselves on a ferris wheel. Jia had gotten all-access passes to an amusement park. Since there are barely any people there, they can use the pass to keep going around the ferris wheel. Minchil tries to get off, but Jia stops him. Jia asks Minchil if he remembers passing out at the bar. She believes he was drinking because of her, and the contract says they need to talk things out. Jia had wanted to discuss it, but Minchil kept avoiding her due to all the trouble she's been through. Minchil owes it to her to stay on the ferris wheel. As the Ajia Han pondered event begins, they start the first round of Truth or Dare. Minchil is confused, so Jia explains the rules. You need to answer truthfully or face punishment, which is a forehead flick if you lie. The game ends if he lies. Minchil doesn't want the forehead flick, which reminds Jia of the time she kissed his forehead. Still, Minchil doesn't want to play, as Truth or Dare often makes a fool of the person. Jia reassures him that this won't happen because she won't lie due to an unpleasant memory related to Yanju. Jia provokes Minchil, saying that this is his chance to ask her anything and even flick her if she lies. Minchil agrees and asks who goes first. They play rock, paper, scissors, and Jia wins. Jia's first question is if Minchil likes her. Minchil gets embarrassed and doesn't answer. When the countdown runs out, Jia flicks his forehead. It's Minchil's turn, and he asks if she likes him. Jia replies that she doesn't not like him, also feeling embarrassed. Minchil is confused and tries to ask another question, but Jia stops him. Jia then asks her next question, saying that she could taste cucumbers after the movie even though she doesn't eat cucumbers. She also mentions that Minchil started avoiding her after that night. Jia asks Minchil if he did something while she was sleeping. Minchil is speechless, so Jia continues by asking if he kissed her that night. She tells him there's no point in avoiding it because they're staying there until she gets an answer. Minchil eventually admits he didn't kiss her. Jia ends the game, declaring that Minchil is lying. He then confesses that he did kiss her that night, but not on the lips. He kissed her forehead. The reason she tasted cucumbers is that he put his finger on her lips. Minchil explains that he was looking at her face while she was sleeping, and it just happened. Jia is confused about why they had so much trouble over a kiss when it was just a forehead kiss. Minchil apologizes, but Jia feels disappointed, suggesting she wanted something more. Minchil apologizes again, and Jia says he doesn't have to, but he insists on apologizing for what he's about to do. At that moment, fireworks go off, and Minchil kisses Jia on the lips. Jia is shocked that Minchil initiated the kiss, but the taste is bitter because he had eaten cucumbers at the bar. Jia pulls away because of the taste, and before she can ask anything, Minchil passes out. Jia struggles to get Minchil out of the Ferris wheel. They later refer to that night as the first great drinking apocalypse and add a rule to their contract: no kissing after eating cucumbers. The next day, as Minchil leaves for work, he says he thought Jia would be more mad. Minchil adds that since he can't kiss after eating cucumbers, it's probably for the best. Minchil says he can't kiss her when he hasn't had cucumbers, and Jia demands he leave for work. At work, Minchil apologizes to Sung-yu about the events of the previous night. Meanwhile, Jia's vacuuming when she gets a notification on her phone. Her stock portfolio has dropped significantly. Jia's devastated. Jia isn't a freelancer who has to work, she's a freelancer who doesn't need to work. The royalties and dividends from the stocks she owns are enough to pay the bills. She's quite loaded. Well, was loaded. Jia thinks her stock app is broken. Why else would the value be falling so much? She's lost 9.28%. Jia decides to wait it out, thinking that selling is for amateurs. Her stocks have gone down before, so it should be fine. Days later, her portfolio drops even further, down 18.18% to Minch. Minchil notices her behavior and becomes concerned. Then there's news that a businessman is getting a divorce, so Jia decides to sell her stocks. The next morning, the stock goes up 12.3%. Jia is furious and starts cussing the businessman out. Jia then decides to go out and eat. She realizes that if she buys stocks when they're down, she's essentially getting a discount. She continues to sell her stocks low and buy high. Now at the gym, her stocks are worth less than her original investment. Minchil asks if Jia's going to work out, and she says yes. He also asks if she's been playing a game on her phone, since she's always looking at it. Jia lies to avoid worrying Minchi, saying she's been watching a show instead. Jia's investment drops even lower, and she deletes the app because she can't stand to look at it. Later that day, there's a scandal with the businessman, causing the stock to plummet even further. She should have sold her stocks, but Jia rationalizes that if she never sells, she never actually loses any money. This is perfect logic for her. Then Minchiel appears, looking very concerned, and asks if Jia likes someone else. Jia is shocked and denies it. Minchiel explains that he saw a video about married couples which stated that if a spouse starts acting differently, they might have someone else. Jia is still confused until she realizes she's checked off all the boxes for suspicious behavior. Minchil points out that she also lied at the gym when she said she was watching a show. He notes that Jia has a tendency to share interesting and funny things with others, but she didn't share the name of the show with him. Jia thinks Minchil took it the wrong way, so she decides to tell him the truth. Minchiel is shocked when Jia admits she lost that much, but she tells him she just didn't want him to worry. Minchiel becomes concerned and asks if it's really okay that she lost all her savings and how she plans to manage living expenses. Jia says she'll just work for money, but deep down it's not fine. What hurts more than losing the money is the impression it left on Minchiel. Minchiel suggests that he could pick up more of the bills, but Jia stops him. She explains that they should take care of their own financial issues, which is why she didn't tell him about the losses at first. For Jia, this is a matter of pride. When she moved out, she promised herself that she would handle her own life. She's proud that she hasn't had to borrow money from anyone. Minchil stands up and says that he trusts her, touching her ears. Jia gets embarrassed and smacks Minchil on the forehead. Minchil explains that he was simply giving Jia his energy by touching her ears. He adds that they used to do this in the past and they would yell energy and fusion while doing it. Jia smacks Minchil again and storms off, angry that he would bring up something from the past. Once she leaves, she realizes that touching someone's ears is a very sensual thing. A week later, Jia is going to job interviews and Minch wishes her good luck before she leaves. Jia has always been lucky throughout her life, but now her struggle to get a job begins. As she crosses the road, a truck suddenly appears, and then the scene shifts to two birds reading a piece of paper. The paper says, "A long time ago in a small village there was an honest lumberjack, and an angel who could not return to heaven because she lost her wings. One day, while the lumberjack is cutting down a tree, he hears the angel calling for him. The angel has found her robe while cleaning the house, and she's excited. But the lumberjack is horrified. The angel continues, saying that the robe had been hidden right under their noses, at the back of the closet. She rhetorically asks, who could have possibly put it there? The lumberjack hangs his head in shame. He's the one who hid the robe. He did it because angels can't fly back to heaven without it, so they're forced to live in the human world. The lumberjack thought he was clever by stealing it while the angel was taking a bath, but the angel knew about the lumberjack's scheme from the very beginning. She could have taken the robe out of the closet as soon as it was placed there, but she didn't, because the angel knows. She starts to tease the lumberjack, playfully suggesting that he hid the robe so she would be forced to live with him, but simple teasing is too much for the lumberjack to handle, and he admits it. He apologizes profusely, justifying it by saying it was all in the name of love. The angel is shocked that the lumberjack admitted it without protest. Instead of leaving, she has other plans. She tells him that if he does her one favor, he will be forgiven. The favor is that whenever they are together, the lumberjack can't wear his glasses. The lumberjack is shocked because he can't see without them. Then the angel accidentally drops his glasses into the water, meaning he can't use them anymore. She continues, calling the lumberjack clueless, saying that she's been dropping hints all along that she doesn't like his glasses. The angel tells the lumberjack that the robe is irrelevant to the situation, since she doesn't plan on going back to heaven anyway. As long as he gets rid of his glasses, she will stay with him. Then, the angel places her hands on the lumberjack's cheeks and slowly leans toward him, almost as if they are about to kiss. Just before their lips touch, the great mountain spirit suddenly emerges from the water with 2 pairs of glasses, asking which one belongs to the lumberjack. Suddenly, Gia screams neither of them and wakes up in a hospital bed. She realizes she didn't become an isekai protagonist and is flustered that it was all just a dream. She's confused about why she had such a strange dream. The story of the lumberjack and the angel ends with them starting a business selling sticky rice cakes to tigers. Gia calls her mother to inform her about the accident, but her mother is horrified. Gia reveals that it wasn't really an accident. Truck-kun stopped right in front of her and barely grazed her. She is unharmed, but she did faint, likely due to being tired from job hunting. The doctor tells Gia to inform her guardian about the accident, but her mother points out that Minchil is her guardian now and asks what he said about it. Gia is shocked. She thought her guardian was still her mother. Upon looking up the definition of guardian, Gia discovers that Minchil is her guardian now. Suddenly, Minchil appears next to Gia, covered in sweat, and asks if she is okay. Gia is confused as to why he's there, but Minchil explains that her mother called him. Then Minchil notices a man talking to the doctor in the distance and approaches him. He towers over the man and menacingly asks if he's the one who hurt his wife. Gia is shocked, having never seen Minchil make a face like that. Upon seeing Minchio, the man bows down and apologizes for what he's done. The doctor tells Minchil to calm down so they can discuss Gia's symptoms. When Gia hears this, she remembers that Minchil and she are now family. This means that Minchil is there whenever she needs him. Minchil confirms that Gia is okay, but instead of leaving, he continues to ask if she's really okay and wants to stay with her. Eventually, Minchil leaves to go back to work, but Gia wishes he could have stayed with her longer. Gia is now walking through the hospital, needing to focus on getting a job. Suddenly, she runs into Yenduk. Gia explains that she fainted because she almost got hit by a truck. Yenduk asks where Gia is going as he walks toward his sports car. Whenever Gia sees a sports car, she knows how much it costs and doesn't dare to walk near it. She's always wondered what type of people drive those kinds of cars, and now she knows. As they walk, Gia's hair blows in her face, and Yenduk starts coughing. He says, "Maybe I should have used one of my other cars." Gia's shocked and asks if he has another car. Yenduk reveals that he has several cars, but they're all rentals. Gia had thought he won the lottery, wondering how else he could afford them, but Yenduk says, "I already won the lottery." Gia is intrigued, but then Yenduk reveals that he hit the jackpot when he ran into Gia. Jia gets angry, frustrated by his cheap pickup lines, but Yenduk suddenly gets serious and asks, "Why are you dressed in a suit?" Jia says that she was on her way to an interview because she needs money. Yenduk is speechless. He points out that Jia made a lot of money from her days as an author and asks if she's already used it all up. Not wanting to reveal what really happened, Jia just says that a lot of things have happened recently and there isn't much left. Yenduk laughs, saying that Jia-han is willing to work a job to pay the bills. Before he can say anything else, Jia flips him off and tells him she isn't going to ride with him again. Yenduk points out that her reaction, without him saying anything, shows she has the writer's spirit. Yenduk then suggests that Jia work at a cafe. Jia is confused, but Yenduk explains that he knows a rich guy who runs one for fun and pays very well, even though there aren't many customers. Jia is baffled that something like that could exist, but Yenduk hands her his business card and tells Jia to call him if she's interested. He can get her an interview. As Jia walks home, she acknowledges that working at the cafe sounds like a good offer, but she doesn't want to owe Yenduk anything, as it would hurt her pride. Suddenly, she spots Minchiel standing and looking at his phone. She deduces that he's been waiting there so they can walk home together. Jia feels a sense of gladness and starts running toward Minchiel. She collides with him, and Minchiel is shocked to see her there. Jia playfully asks Minchiel questions about him being there. Minchiel simply replies with a yes, and Jia teases him, asking if something is wrong with his head since he didn't elaborate. Then Jia suddenly realizes she's hugging Minchiel in public and everyone is looking at them. She quickly backs away, but Minchiel pulls her back into a hug and asks why she hasn't been answering his calls. Jia explains that her phone was on silent and that he was worried. Jia confirms that she's okay and tells him she wants to stop hugging because people are staring, but Minchiel insists they continue for just a little longer. He's always so nice to Jia that she feels bad for making him worry. She knows she needs to put her pride aside to prevent him from stressing, so she declares that she got a job working at a cafe. That means she won't be jobless anymore and will be heading to work tomorrow. She suggests they go out and celebrate. Jia playfully asks if Minchi will risk losing all his gains by having a cheat day today, and Minchi agrees. Jia is glad to see Minchi not worrying anymore. His smile is so much better than when he's concerned. The next day, Jia arrives at the interview. And to her surprise, the owner is shocked that she's on time, but Jia is even more shocked to realize that the owner is none other than Yenduk. Jia was living a completely normal life, but then she rediscovered the importance of working. However, she didn't like any of the job offers she had received so far. That was until she got a call from her old boss, who was recruiting her for a job. Jia was suspicious of his offer, but she didn't realize Yenduk would trick her like this. As Jia tried to figure out what to do, Yenduk began reading off her resume. He noticed that Jia had dropped out of college, worked in a call center for 2 years, had a few part-time jobs, but no real work experience. Yenduk noticed Jia seemed distracted and asked what was wrong. Jia didn't know what to do since she hadn't spoken to Yenduk in years. But before she could respond, Yenduk interrupted her thoughts, assuring her not to worry. He wouldn't have interviewed Jia if he wasn't serious about hiring her. Yenduk never thought he would meet Jia again, but after looking over her resume, he said he had seen enough. Then he noticed that Jia was married. He took off his glasses to confirm what he had seen and, upon closer inspection, realized that Jia was indeed married. He was shocked. Jia recalled that Yenduk Choi was the one responsible for all the good memories in college. She also observed how her old hair color was the same as Yenduk's current hair color, wondering if that meant he hadn't moved on from the past. Yenduk had always made Jia think ambition was cool, even though she had no aspirations back then. Now, Yenduk had written dozens of novels, 3 of which were now TV shows, and he only continued to grow. After her debut, Yenduk didn't need luck like Jia did, but now she was Jia's boss. Yenduk laughed when she heard Jia was married, never imagining that the same girl who stayed up all night reading web novels in Yenduk's room would end up married. Jia revealed that her husband was her childhood friend, and Yenduk asked how they got married. Jia avoided the question, instead showing her pictures from her honeymoon. Yenduk was impressed. Jia thought their conversation might be awkward since they hadn't seen each other in years, but it was actually quite pleasant, as if they'd just seen each other yesterday. She remembered how Yenduk used to be awkward, but now, with vast sums of money, perhaps her confidence came from having enough to spare. It felt like there was a spotlight on Yenduk. Before Jia left, she asked if it was really okay to be working full-time at the cafe. Yenduk shrugged, saying it didn't matter since she was the owner and could do whatever she wanted. Jia's first day at the cafe was on Monday. Before her taxi left, Jia said it had been nice seeing Yenduk. Yenduk smiled and told Jia to get home safe. Jia arrived home and celebrated getting the job. Minchiel was concerned, but Jia reassured him. Meanwhile, Yenduk was at home, looking at an old picture of her and Jia. She smiled and whispered that she should be the one thanking Jia, implying she had been playing 4D chess the whole time, and this was all part of her master plan. Meanwhile, Jia and Minchia were blowing out candles on a cake to celebrate.